Well, welcome everybody. I'm Rob Whitney, Chair of the Business New Zealand Energy Council, and I'd like to welcome you to this this session and to thank Rob Wiles and Steve I get the pronunciation Alesech right for presenting us, giving us today the story about Z and biofuels and their new developments and how they see the markets developing. And before we start, I'd just also like to mention the three of the World Energy Council initiatives. And as you know, Business New Zealand Energy Council is the New Zealand member of the World Energy Council, and how New Zealand is following through the World Energy Council initiatives, and how this biofuels work fits very nicely into that. So the three initiatives there are, is first there's the Energy Issues Survey. This is a survey of energy executives around the world, which is basically what keeps me awake at night. And it's looking at the things that the industry is concerned about and the industry needs to take action about. New Zealand provides a deep dive in this, so we do a sub-survey in New Zealand. We had about 40 participants last year, and it was one of the larger sub-surveys. We're doing that again this year, and so we want to encourage everybody in the next week to complete that survey, so we get better than the 40. WEC will process that and give us a New Zealand version of what we think about the world energy sector differs from the rest of the world. So if you're interested in that, talk to John Carnegie if he's not already been bombarding you with emails about it. The second is the World Energy Council Energy Trilemma, and so it is trying to take a balanced view about the future of energy, looking at three basic issues: energy security, energy affordability and accessibility, and energy environmental sustainability. And so this is the criteria which we should be looking to balance energy developments against. And what is quite clear globally is when you ignore any one of those three issues, then you have problems. And there's been a situation in the UK recently where they've decided to fix the price of energy, and that suddenly started electricity, and that suddenly started bringing new generation projects into question, and so energy security then suddenly becomes an interest. So the energy industry can't ignore any of those three trilemma issues. As part of the project, WEC does an energy trilemma rating of all countries. We come 8th at the moment, which is pretty good, and of our GDP group with the highest. And we have an AAB rating, with the B on environmental sustainability. So this is particularly good that we're doing this particular biofuels initiative, because that will help that. And the third initiative is the World Energy Council Scenarios, and I was executive chair of that, and we launched them in Daegu in October last year. We developed two scenarios: JAZ, a basically consumer market-led scenario, and Symphony, a voter state-led scenario. What we're wanting to do within New Zealand to take that and the trilemma forward is to develop a New Zealand story, to develop a set of best policies and practices for New Zealand, such that we maximise our energy trilemma performance. So we are aiming to maximise our energy trilemma performance, and see where the future cone of these policies might take us, depending on whether the world goes JAZ or scenario, or JAZ or Symphony. And we're already talking to the modelling group in Switzerland that did the WEC scenarios modelling, and we're hopefully able to get a major project going in New Zealand where we can do this. So how will New Zealand go in a JAZ and Symphony world with a suite of best policies and practices? And because it's New Zealand, they will tend to be a jazzy market-led suite. So those are three issues, and I think what we see is that how the biofuels initiatives will fit into that, and so hopefully improve New Zealand's energy performance and take the lead for others. So Rob and Steve, thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rob. I think the thing that stood out from what Rob just mentioned was the scenarios. For us, I think one of the things we are very focused on is looking out 30 plus years, and I think that's something I want to take up with you afterwards, which is get a better sense of where those are going. Jazz and symphony sounds like two quite interesting sort of points. Anyway, just to clear up, I guess, who we are. So I am the General Manager Corporate, and as General Manager Corporate, I get to look after some of the cool stuff that's happening here in the organization. That includes strategy, sustainability, and working with Steve to get this project off the ground. So there's a few other areas, but those are the few key things which I guess really I'm really passionate about. Now Steve Alesech, Steve has been with us for a number of years, decades, if easily, well, quite a few years anyway. So Steve has been and had a range of positions, senior positions across Shell and now Zed. And Steve has been our point man in bringing this project to fruition. So we spent a good 4 years on this project, and in the last 2 years, Steve has just grabbed it by the throat and really driven it through to get our approvals and get ourselves started. But before we get started, I think I just want to give you first a safety message. So if you do feel an earthquake, or you do feel or you do hear the alarms go off, that is a signal to evacuate. So in the case of a fire, what we'll do is Steve and I are in charge, so we will take you out through the front doors here, and we'll just assemble just out here in front of this Wellington Harbour building. So we'll just assemble that. Keep your pad, keep your things on, and we'll collect them at the end of it to make sure everybody's evacuated. If there happens to be an earthquake, then we go one step further and we go into Frank Kitts Park, and we just want to avoid any of these buildings. So that's the safety message. Now for toilets, we have toilets directly behind the coffee machine, so as you go out, some of you have been here before, others not, but if you go straight out the door, you'll find there's men's and ladies' toilets out there. And then at 1 o'clock, we'll be bringing in lunch. So at 1 o'clock, there's a lunch buffet, and then some of you, then we'll conclude about 1:30, and then some of you will be heading back for a continuation meeting with Business New Zealand, and the rest of you enjoy the rest of the afternoon. So Steve and I are going to do a bit of a dog and pony. So I've got a series of slides, and then Steve's got a series of slides. And we're going to be, if necessary, supporting each other, but hopefully we'll be able to get through each part of the presentation. We won't request that you don't ask any questions. And the only reason for that is because it's being recorded, it actually is quite a challenge to record the questions, get the questions on voice, and then so we're going to have a Q&A at the end of it. And I think, Rob, you've offered to chair the Q&A, so get the questions coming out, pass the microphone out, and look to answer those. So we're looking to try and get through our body of slides in just under 40 minutes, and that leaves a good 20 minutes for Q&A, notwithstanding we've probably already used almost 5 to 10 minutes. So that was your spot, Rob. That's perfectly right. We'll try and squeeze things up a little bit. That's good. And so I'm going to start just by saying, and I suppose creating the context that Zed is different from a typical oil company. And we're different because we don't get involved in upstream. We don't do exploration. And because we don't do exploration, we're not wedded to the future of fossil fuels. And because we're not wedded to the future of fossil fuels, and we're focusing only on New Zealand, for us, having an alternate energy strategy is really important. Because for us, it's about our long-term sustainability of our business. And we think of ourselves as an energy company that provides energy for transport. So it doesn't have to be fossil fuels, it's energy for transport. So we've built our long-term strategy, alternate energy strategy around that concept. So just having said that helps you get a picture of when we talk briefly about our alternate energy strategy, and we talk about why we're interested in biodiesel and biofuels. That'll give you a better sense of where that fits in. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a few of the key messages I want to get across. So this is essentially the agenda, but these are the few key messages that I want you to come away with it at the end of it. One, there has been a fundamental change in the oil markets globally, and that has ramifications on the future of alternate energy. The second is there are plenty of mechanisms globally that support alternate energy, and there's a whole plethora of them out there, and then New Zealand has these sort of support mechanisms. We had said we've undertaken a really in-depth alternate energy strategy and research. We've looked at a range of options, and we've really only identified 2 that we feel are worthy of pursuing in the next few years. And those are around the biofuel space, first in generation, second biofuels. Then the next thing is the WIRI. Steve is going to take you through the WIRI biodiesel project and outline the, I suppose, the key aspects, what it's actually going to do, what it's going to deliver, and just reminding, I guess, the audience that we have embarked upon this on the basis of there being no subsidy, no mandate, and we've looked to structure it on the basis that it's economically sustainable in its own right. And then lastly, Steve will comment on some of the key aspects of the project as to why it is commercially viable. So I think that is important for this type of venture in New Zealand in the present environment, that it does need to be commercially viable. So that's the frame of how we're going to address it. We've got a series of slides, and I'm going to start with the big picture. So in chatting with John earlier, we decided that probably the best things, rather than jumping straight into the project, is to talk about the really big picture. So what is the global context? What is the global environment we're operating in? And then talk about what's the regulatory environment both globally and what does it look like here in New Zealand. And then spend a couple minutes just on what our alternate energy strategy is. And then we move into Steve being able to talk about the WIRI biodiesel project. So we're starting big, and I'm looking to get down to the actual project itself. So, kicking off, I think the key message here is that the long-term supply and demand profile has changed significantly. And most of you will be aware of this, if not all of you. You're all got an energy background, but you will have noted the significant change just in the last few years. And what we've seen is this has been driven by the significant advances in technology and the ability to extract shale gas and tight oil. And that has led to a significant change, if not a paradigm shift, in the future of both the global, I suppose, the global political environment, and in particular what we're looking at, the crude supply, and also what that does mean to the future of alternate energy. And so these things really point to a very different world. And so there's a range of factors here on the left, which I won't go into any detail, but there will be a slide pack available that will be available on the website. But the key thing is here, this has all coincided at the same time as we had the GFCs. GFC occurred, we had this advance in technology, and now looking forward, we've got an environment where fossil fuels will continue to be a dominant, I suppose, the dominant mechanism or the dominant source of energy for transport. So what that does is it also has, I guess, one of the key impacts is on the opposing side of that is we've got this increasing supply. We've now got the demand question. What we're seeing in the Western economies is the Western world is actually using less and less fuel. Part of it's been driven by the GFC, which has actually got people using less. It's also energy efficiency, vehicle efficiency, which has had a real impact. And another impact is there's been a significant change in behaviors of how people use transport. And so we've done research that you guys would have seen a lot of this sort of research where younger people are using less vehicles. They're more likely to use public transport. People are actually driving less kilometers per year. And so we're seeing a change in the actual trends. But as we're seeing the supply going up, we're seeing the developed economies coming down in their actual demand. We're still seeing the developing economies, the demand's actually increasing. So what we look for the next 10 to 20 years, that's going to have a significant change in the geopolitical environment. But what does that mean for us here? It means that when we look at the governments globally and the support of alternate energy, it's been driven by two things. It's been driven by, first, the price of fuel. It's significant that's been a government thing where the governments have been concerned, and it's been around sort of peak oil concerns that the price of fuel will continue to rise. So that has been a real impetus behind a lot of the alternate energy support in the regulatory environment. Plus, it's been driven also by green considerations, which are sort of I suppose, the more greening of politics, the more greening of everyone in this room and in this country, and globally in their support of green initiatives. But the unfortunate thing is, or for alternate energy, is this pillar has arguably been removed. So the concern now around oil prices continue to climb. And if you recall, it was only 3-4 years ago, people were talking about oil reaching $200 a barrel and plus. You talk to global commentators now, and oil is likely to trade in the region of $80 to $100 for Brent for the foreseeable future, although it's slightly higher than that now. So all commentators are expecting that to come down a little bit. So what does that mean? It means the pressure on alternate energy has one of its legs removed. So it does mean that anything around moving forward in the green space is going to be driven by politics, and it's going to be driven by voters. So if we look at for market change, this does have an impact on alternate energy and the future for alternate energy. The key thing that I see is that we, Z, our business model is now extended an awful lot further. What it does mean, though, is from an alternate energy, is it's unlikely there to be a significant change in alternate energy unless there's a dramatic improvement in the technology or the economics. And the second one is there's a sustained increase in oil prices. So oil prices will need to come back up, and long-term governments start to worry about it for that to be, again, a significant kick in order to support substantive growth. And last is government intervention. So when we've looked at all of these things, the key thing for us is this is going to continue, as liquid fossil fuels will continue, and we don't really see a significant impact of electric vehicles for quite some time. We believe it's important, and it is absolutely on its way, but it's going to take quite a bit longer than I think people had originally envisaged. So now we look at the biofuel support mechanisms. So here it was, and again, most of you will be aware of it, there are a range of mechanisms that have been used over the last decade globally, and every country has a different approach as to how they direct it. Principally, it's around carbon tax or ETS. We've got two different systems operating in the US and Europe, but they are having a real impact in the US and Europe. And there's mandates around requiring either the blending of renewable fuels and a requirement for the fuels to come from sustainable sources or sustainable sources. So in the US, one of the key things there is their requirement for all states to increase the amount of blend, and it tends to be a straight different thing, but to increase the amount of renewable fuels being blended in. And in Europe, they've got I suppose the onus is on the actual oil companies to ensure that there's a certain amount of fuel being blended in. Then if we look a little bit further and we look at what this is actually done in the US, and I guess this is just one slide to illustrate how government intervention can have an impact. And I'm not suggesting they should intervene here in New Zealand, but if you want biofuels and you look at the US, through their intervention, there's some 140 odd sites producing biodiesel. And right now, it's approximately, back in 2013, it's just under 5% of total diesel consumed actually is a form of biodiesel. But now when we look globally, and we look at mandates, so mandate is one of the examples of what's been used in the US. Across the world, there are a range of mandates that countries, I think there's some 60 countries that have got mandates. Here's just a smattering of examples. The ones in black are where they are actually, I guess, a legislated mandate that oil companies have to meet. The ones in red, highlighted in red, are ones where they're targets but not necessarily mandates. So you see there's quite a range from anywhere between 1% to 20%. And here in New Zealand, we don't have a mandate or target in New Zealand. But I'll touch on that, tell you what we used to have in the previous regimes. So if we look at domestic fuel policies, a lot of the stuff will be familiar. You guys will well be familiar with it. So I think Labor back in 2008 introduced a biofuels bill that kick-started quite a few small opportunities here in New Zealand, and there were a range of small companies looking to try and jump on this opportunity. It didn't last particularly long. National came in and changed it. The Greens tried to do something which never got through legislation. And the key one here, what was around for a few years, was the national government put aside a grant of a certain amount of money, which was equivalent to about a 43.5 cent per litre benefit or rebate for any biofuels that was produced. And that ended up supporting a couple of industries, in particular Biodiesel New Zealand, based out of Christchurch, was a beneficiary of that grant. But that was pulled, I think it was April last year, wasn't it?
2 years ago.
Yeah, it expired. It expired like 2 years ago now. Yeah.
Going on 3 years now, probably.
It would be almost 3 years. Yeah, so that's expired for quite some time, and there was certainly no indication from the national government that anything else would be following. And so as we looked to develop this project, it was done in the full understanding or in the full expectation that there was actually nothing else likely to come. So currently we have an ETS system. Many of you will be active in it or understand it. See, we've got a few electricity companies here, so you'll be well aware of how that operates. The jury will be out as to whether that's had a really strong influence on alternate energy. I'd say given the price where it is now for both the EUR compliant ones and even the NZ compliant ones at sort of $4 plus, it's not particularly onerous nor a really strong incentive to support alternate energy. The only other one where there's sort of some money on the table is in the use of ethanol blending. And there's only two of our competitors do it to a very small extent, blend in a bit of ethanol and enjoy the benefit of not having to pay excise on that. And ECA provide a lot of education materials to support alternate energy and also to support energy efficiency. So if we look at what's actually happening at the moment, that's the environment we're operating in. Where it gets interesting now is what's going to happen post the election. Or I guess where does everyone else's stand? Where are the Greens and Labour stand on this? And it's really been only in the last few days that we started to see the Greens come out with their policy and then Labour also providing commentary on the Greens policy. And so the dust is yet to settle on that space. And so I've just dumped on a few key points here as to where it's like what might happen is possibly reintroduce a mandate from those parties. The Labour has certainly mentioned it wants to strengthen the ETS system. Just mentioned this morning, Cunliffe was saying that he sees there will need to be some significant negotiation between them and Greens around whether it's ETS or whether it's a carbon tax, with the Greens certainly favour. And the Greens have come out and said they'd be looking to provide support to try and speed up the introduction of alternate energy and a particular biofuel production here in New Zealand if they had their way. So when it comes to Q&A time, if there's any further commentary you guys have that you can share with us around your views in that space, we'd certainly be welcome to hear all of that. So now, having looked at the big picture, and the key takeaway there is oil's going to be around for an awful lot longer. The price is going to be fairly stable. So the key driver in alternate energy is going to be politics, and it's going to be voters is going to be driving that. If you look at the regulatory environment is very different everywhere. There's no real set approach to how to manage carbon, and that has been, I suppose, a challenge for people operating in the space globally to have some global approach to it. And that may well continue, or probably will continue. When we look at New Zealand, we're operating in an environment that there's very little to support alternate energy, and it's also the present government is keen on companies like ourselves being able to develop this on our own economic basis. And I guess that is exactly what we've done. Looking forward, don't know what the environment looks like going forward. I think if National stays in, their stated policy is likely to be little or no change, and we have yet to, I suppose, get some clarity around what would happen if these two were to run the country. So having sort of looked at the big picture and then looked at I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about our alt energy strategy and then pass across to Steve. So having looked at this global context and then looking at it in a New Zealand environment, we've gone and looked at 15 odd different types of technologies that can be used for transport. And we've looked at what has happened offshore, and then we've looked to see how does it actually fit within New Zealand, and within what time frame could it be economically viable within New Zealand. So we've done that with both internal team and some external experts to support us, and then we've tested our outcomes, or I suppose our outcomes or our theories with other third parties who are experts in this space. Anyway, so where we've landed up is across that whole universe of options, and we look at how it fits in New Zealand and when they're likely to become of I suppose, a scale that's economically viable, we really only end up with two. And I guess there's no surprise, it probably is no surprise to you if you've been following what we've been up to. It's been first generation and second generation biofuels. So we've made no secret over the last few years that we have been investigating a tallow to biodiesel plant. And that's been on and off now for 4 years, and it's just a lot of the work is obviously done behind the scenes, but we have made comments to the public around that. And the second is the second generation around woody biomass. And as many of you will be aware, we are involved with Norske Skog in what we've been calling the Stump to Pump initiative. And so we have had some support from the government in undertaking that initiative. But we're not here to talk about Stump to Pump. We're here to talk about woody biodiesel. So having done all of that, we've identified these two key areas. And so I guess what this has done, this strategy was carried out about 18 months ago. And we just, every year, we renew it and reassess what the environment is. So when we look forward, it does not mean that anything else is off the radar, because when you reassess the environment, things change. And so in 1 to 2 years, we may well find ourselves looking to progress some other opportunities as they shift, either because they're coming sooner or for whatever reason the fit has actually improved for New Zealand. So that's our alt energy strategy and where we're actually focusing. I'm not going to bore you with what the key things we're actually looking for in driving that strategy, or what we need in order for it to be economic. Some of it will become apparent when Steve actually talks about the Wiri biodiesel project. So you guys may have questions. Hold them now, and please feel free to bring them back when we come back to Q&A. So Steve, I'm going to pass over to you. So we're going to spend the next 10 minutes talking about Wiri biodiesel. Over to you, mate.
Thanks, Rob. Apology in advance to any vegetarians in the room. Somebody said to me the other day, gee, there's a cool program called Stump to Pump in your organisation, and you've got this tallow, business going on. I guess that's your carcass to car project. So I couldn't argue with that. It sounds pretty good. So as Rob said, we've been developing this project now for the last 4 years. In fact, it probably goes back 6 years, really, when we first started talking to a company in New Zealand about a process that they were developing around biodiesel manufacture, which was back in the day when I guess there was a mandate in place. For me personally, as Z's Biofuels Manager, I've been involved in this project in terms of getting the tallow production facility or biodiesel facility up and running over the last 2 years. Primarily, really, the responsibility around that has been getting the project through our engineering feasibility study, and really understanding how we can bring this project to life from a cost and risk perspective. And so where we're at now is very much at having completed that feasibility study, and we're on the cusp of construction. Ready to go. Diggers are firing up the engines as we speak, waiting in anticipation for us to press the green light. So just a bit of background around the facility, and look, there's some points up here that you're welcome to read. I'm not specifically going to talk to, so just want to give you some background in terms of where we're at with the project. The business for us now is at a stage where we feel like it's really commercially viable. And as Rob said, we've developed on the basis there is no subsidy, and we certainly haven't factored anything in terms of mandate or subsidy into the business case that we put to our board, of which we were granted approval on. The facility itself will be based in Wiri. The reason for that is that's our largest target market. We've designed the facility around the available tallow in that particular region, and specifically around our demand for biodiesel to our own commercial and retail customers in the Upper North Island. It's also, we took a lot of time to determine whether or not Wiri was the right place. Originally this project was based in Onehunga in Auckland, at a facility which turned out to be fairly, it just wasn't fit for purpose. We looked at Tauranga, we looked at Hamilton, Waikato, and really the logistics stacked up quite favourably in terms of Wiri. Good labour base, the costs of construction not that much greater than Hamilton, and realistically just as just difficult anywhere really when it comes to getting resource consents or other sorts of consents. So the decision was made to build this plant in Wiri, and to that extent we partnered with a company called PFI, who is a development company who will provide the building and the property for us to build our biodiesel plant in. The project's going to take about a year to complete. So if we were to start today, we would be producing biodiesel by July next year, and going through a 3-month commissioning phase, getting up to full production at 20 million litres by around about August, September. Some key features of the plant in terms of its capital cost. The whole project is a $21 million capital cost project. Of that, we've got around about $16 million that we'll spend building the biodiesel plant itself. There's $3 million that we'll spend building blending and storage facilities at our facilities in Mount Maunganui, and also our co-joint terminal in Wiri Oil Terminal. We've spent another couple of $1 million based on the feasibility study and also the implementation that we will need to do in terms of getting this project integrated and implemented within the Z business. So the process itself is not particularly new. It's a process called transesterification. It's been around, the process has been around for probably 70 or 80 years. It's well known, well proven. There's nothing secret really in that in terms of its IP. But the challenge has really been about the feedstock. So taking tallow as a feedstock and transesterifying tallow has always been quite a difficult process to do, which is why traditionally throughout the world used cooking oil and palm oil and vegetable oils are generally used as a feedstock for biodiesel production. What we do know though is that to produce a really good quality biodiesel from tallow, you need a really good distillation process. So it's not just about the transition and the process, the chemical process, it's about how you clean that product up and how you get it to a state that meets both New Zealand specification and European EN 14214 spec. And in addition, meet the requirements of engine manufacturers over and above that. So the other thing about the plant, I guess, from our perspective, we own the plant, so we're not indebted to any particular company around the IP. We actually own all of the IP. We've taken a pilot facility, we've taken an idea, and we've spent the last 2 years really bringing that commercial reality. So it's been a really steep learning curve for us in terms of developing the capability, developing the right partners around that piece of work. Really satisfying piece of work as well, because this really is truly sort of Kiwi ingenuity that's got us to the stage that we're at now. To the extent that potentially, while it's not, this isn't rocket science, there's some proprietary stuff within this plant that we can sell offshore. There's some uniqueness about the plant in terms of its low energy requirements. It's very low waste. So there's minimal waste in the plant. There's a lot of recycling used in the plant. It runs off its own fuel to a certain extent. There's a unique methanol recovery process and also a two-stage distillation cleanup process that we've developed, which is an unusual factor or an unusual piece of sort of technology for a biodiesel plant is to actually get rid of water as a cleanup facility and produce a waterless cleanup process, which is what we've got. I guess the other thing too is, as well as being quite pleased around the technology that we've developed, we're also really pleased to be able to use a locally available and indigenous feedstock such as tallow, which is a byproduct of the meat industry. So tallow is essentially produced as part of production of animal feed and virtually 100% exported offshore to Asian countries generally for production of soap and candle manufacture. It is being used more and more now for biodiesel production globally as well as in the Asia Pacific region. It's been, I guess, identified because of its really good greenhouse gas or CO2 reduction qualities, as well as I guess the other thing around sort of tallow is from a quantity perspective, there's about 150,000 tallow produced annually in New Zealand. We'll use something like 10 of that in our first stage of production. So we're not actually doing it that will impact on price. As I said, the project is on the cusp or poised for pushed, and the board's approved it. We've got a couple of conditions that I've been working on over the last couple of months to close out. Primarily, they're really around resource consents, overseas investment office consent, land use consent, air discharge consent. The list goes on and on and on. But we're there. So we're currently at the point of just signing off on a couple of key commercial contracts, and we're virtually weeks away from being able to push the green button. I'll just click on to the next slide. I guess one of the questions I always get asked is, why are you even bothering to do this? Why is Z interested in building a biodiesel plant? Nobody else is. People have been there and tried and failed. Why is it so important to us? There's a number of different reasons that for us as to why this plant project is really important. And I guess one of the things for me personally is, as a Kiwi, is that if we don't do this project, no one will, and there's a real window of opportunity to get this up and running. And I guess there's a number of people in the room here that know how difficult it is to get these sorts of projects up and running. Not least of all you, Liz, and you've lived and breathed biodiesel and biofuels for a number of years. The key thing for us is that the project really establishes a viable point of difference for us as well as a company. So it delivers on a real competitive advantage that our competitors would really struggle to follow. I mean, one of the options for us is to just import biodiesel. And I often get asked that, why don't you just import, why bother building a plant? Importing biodiesel would be more expensive for our customers. Importing biodiesel doesn't give us a sustainability advantage. It doesn't build capability for either New Zealand or for Z in terms of building a bridge to more advanced biofuels. Rob mentioned the stump to pump program before. There's a lot of similarities in the two programs around acquisition of feedstocks. While we're not a company that drags oil out of the ground, we are a company that's really good at buying and selling crude oil and refined products. We don't have a hell of a lot of experience when it comes to wood chips, tallow and used cooking oil. So this is a really good opportunity for us to, at a fairly low cost compared to stump to pump, probably somewhere in the $1 to $2 billion category. This is a really good cost opportunity or low cost opportunity for us to develop our capability. The production economics are really sound as well. So we've spent a lot of time making sure that we have given ourselves as much opportunity to mitigate risks. I guess our biggest risk is specifically around the tallow. Risks fall into three categories. Product quality, we're absolutely clear that we've got a process that will produce a product that is going to meet our product quality requirements. Basis risk is the difference in cost between tallow and mineral diesel. Traditionally, the two aren't correlated. There's quite a bit of volatility in both. However, there is a fair amount of, I guess, evidence to suggest that there's more and more correlation happening as tallow is used more and more for biodiesel production. The other thing is that there's a fair amount of tallow available in New Zealand, and what we will use is not going to disrupt supply to any major extent. We also know that over the last 5-6 years there have been some quite good spreads between tallow and diesel. So currently tallow trades at a relative discount to diesel. So we're reasonably confident that we'll get the supply of product that we need and at the price that we require it at to make the plant economic. It really supports our brand position. We've talked a bit about that before. I won't spend too much time on that, but we have we've made some public stands about being New Zealand's largest biofuels supplier. It's not that difficult to do in New Zealand, given that nobody really is doing biofuels, but we do actually have a genuine stand that we want to make a real difference, I guess, in the field of biofuels in New Zealand. So this project really does go a long way towards committing and completing on that stand. It's a differentiated offer for our commercial customers particularly. So what also gives us a real sense of confidence is that the level of commitment and passion that we've got from our commercial customers. We've gone out to our major commercial customers and they've provided us with a level of commitment that will assure that the majority of product that we sell or that we produce in the plant is already underwritten. And they've taken that commitment on the basis that they'll pay a small premium for that product as well. The third bucket that I talked about before around risk for us is health. While we've done a lot of work in finessing the price to construct this plant, at one stage this project was dead in the water because the cost escalated by more than 100%. We've managed to be able to bring that price back, but we haven't done that at the expense of safety, and we haven't done it at the expense of quality. We've simply done it by partnering with businesses that are really passionate about making this project work. We're confident also that our product will be more than competitive with imported biodiesel. We know how much it's going to cost to import bio. We've been down that route. We've had a look at what it costs to import biodiesel into New Zealand. We know we're competitive. In fact, we're more than competitive. So just in terms of our investment rationale, there's a few things there just before I close off. Our target case, the case we put to our board, meets the investment hurdles. In other words, it provides a positive NPV for our business over the next 10 years. There's some real risks that could impact that target case, but there's also some real upsides potentially. If there is a change in, I guess, government policy and we do end up with a subsidy, or we do end up with a mandate, or whatever may happen in that space, that is a bonus for us. We haven't factored that in, but if that did happen, that would be a bonus. What that would do would be to encourage us to go to the next stage of production. So the plant that we are building is capable of producing 20 million litres of biodiesel per annum. We can expand that for another $2 million to double the capacity to 40 million. And with the right criteria in place, we would also look at potentially another 1 or 2 plants. So on the basis of that our project meets our internal investment hurdles, we also, acknowledge that there are going to be some really big challenges for us ahead. Once we do start construction, we've got 12 months to get our house in order in terms of supply, the integration into Z, the implementation into our customers. There's a lot of work to do ahead of us. And we're really realistic about what those challenges look like. And we're really, I guess, proven that we're up for the challenge and looking forward to it. So with that, that's essentially my sort of overview of the biodiesel project, and really, I guess, hand over to Rob to take any further questions or open up for the Q&A.
Thanks, Steve. I think there's a couple of things, just before, John, you sort of open for questions, just a couple of things that Steve was talking, I just wanted to sort of, I guess, bring out. At the outset, I mentioned that Z is different. And if any of you have visited our website, you'll see in there that we've come out with a statement, and this was already about 4 years ago, where we've said, we recognize that oil is one of the key, oil used for transport is one of the key contributors to global warming. And that we are not wedded to fossil fuels, and that we feel an obligation to look to be not, we recognize we're part of the problem, but we also want to be part of the solution. So the stands that Steve was talking to earlier about flow from that original statement. So we've got a series of sustainability stands, and that is one of the key ones, which is look to be a provider or the leading provider of alternate energy forms here in New Zealand for transport. And the second thing, which is I think is for Steve, is we're certainly recognizing that the last couple of years have been a challenge in actually finally getting the project so it's economical and we can actually get board approval and all the moving parts fits together. The hard work really now begins, because now we've actually got to go ahead and build it and start getting the distribution and get our customers all lined up. So it's been a real fun journey for the last few years to get us this far. Now the next sort of year will be a real roller coaster. So look forward to sharing with you how we progress, and look forward to your support as and if we come across any hurdles in getting across the line. And obviously, when you finally start filling your diesel-filled SUV, come along and get yourself your 5% blend from Z. So now over to Q&A. So Rob, if you want to manage that, that's fine. If you've got a microphone, you want to capture stuff. And just conscious, we've actually done a reasonable job of keeping the time, so we got 10 minutes for Q&A, and then some lunch will come in.
Gavin Adlam, I wonder if I could ask you to elaborate a little bit on how the biodiesel fits into the transport fuels market. Is it going to be available at the pump? Is it usable as a blended product? Can an operator use flip-flop between biodiesel and ordinary diesel, or is it a different product and goes down a completely different channel? I wonder if you could elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah,
Steve,
you want me?
I'll let you
Yeah,
answer.
sure. So without giving away any commercial secrets, legislatively, the biodiesel can be sold at a 5% blend at retail sites. It can be blended with mineral fuel without any labelling, without any notification to customers. So we could do that, but we're not going to do that. We also know that at a 5% blend rate, that manufacturers across the board support that, and that there is no issue. So retail-wise, if you went to a Z service station and it had a biodiesel blend, that would be the only biodiesel or diesel product that you could buy from that. We won't have the choices to buy either a diesel or a biodiesel blend. From a commercial perspective, commercial customers have the choice to take a range of blends from 5% through to 20% or even 100% if they want it. Typically, most commercial customers opt for sort of 5 to 10% while they sort of develop the experience and the confidence in being able to move to higher blend rates.
So yeah, the customer will not notice any difference at a B5, which is 5% sort of biodiesel and then 95%.
That's a good point. I think from an energy and economy perspective, there's no noticeable difference at all at a 5% blend. At 100% biodiesel versus 100% mineral diesel, there's a slight drop in energy content, but evidence shows that doesn't actually translate into less economy or less power.
George Hooper, just as a point of clarification, not a question, but I'm interested, and if it's commercial, then feel free to say so. But of course, one of the issues with tallow root and the esterification is managing the byproduct from the product. And I'm just interested in what way you've actually managed to do that in terms of your the overall business model. It'd be just of interest for no other reasons, because it is one of the issues you have to deal with. And I just sort of asked a supplementary, if you like, on terms of the last comment. I had presumed that you would probably supply first into your commercial customers rather than into the commercial blend, because the last thing, I have an aphorism which basically goes along the line that you only need one car to stall at one traffic light, and that product's dead in the water. So I presume that you'll be a significant period with your commercial customers before it goes out into the retail market.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The primary market for our product is commercial. So more than 2/3 of our production will go into the commercial market. We will, at some stage, implement into the retail market, but that will be done as a staged occurrence, yeah. Yeah, so for those that aren't aware, a byproduct of biodiesel production is glycerol or glycerin. Glycerin's used in a range of different manufacturing applications, from vitamin capsules to shampoos to soaps to all sorts of cooking, all sorts of different types of applications. To get to that point, glycerin has to be refined so to an extent that it's an industrial grade. Our glycerin, when we produce biodiesel, is probably about pure. We have a tentative market for it into animal food, but we're also exploring some other options with water treatment. So glycerol is a great source of carbon. Water treatment companies use carbon to feed anaerobic bugs in their water treatment systems. Currently they use methanol to do that, and glycerol could be a potential replacement for methanol. Yeah. So we're exploring how we can get rid of our product or into the marketplace, what value we can extract from the marketplace as 75% pure glycerol. And we're also looking at what it would cost to refine to industrial grade and to be able to sell that. So New Zealand uses about, I think, 2 million litres of glycerol a year that it imports. Coincidentally, we would produce about 2 million litres a year through our plant in the first stage.
Hi gentlemen, Aaron from the Motor Trade Association. I was just wondering, I might be a bit premature on this question, but what sort of above the line marketing are you guys going to use to drive this consumer driven change, or will it simply be user's choice at the pump?
Great question. And to be absolutely straight up with you, we haven't established the above the line marketing strategy at this stage. What we will be looking at is essentially, because this is not a national rollout of product, is that it will be regionally generated. So when we go out to the retail market, it will be very much a on-site, regionally generated, customer-focused education, and we would look to partner with, for example, ICA and the AA to be able to do that. We've had conversations also with the original equipment manufacturers, the likes of Scania and Co, the Motor Traders, MIA, Motor Industry Association, to talk about how we can basically obtain their support to stimulate, I guess, education and support from a consumer perspective.
Ken Shirley, Road Transport Forum. As I understand it, the new generation low compression diesel engines are talking about a 20-30% improvement in efficiency, a further 20-30%. Would the biodiesel be compatible with that? That's the first part of the question. The second part is, as I understand it, many of the, particularly the truck engine manufacturers, void the warranty if you exceed the 5% biodiesel. Are you having discussions with or is there an international discussion going on in terms of lifting that point where the warranty of a new engine is voided if you exceed 5% biodiesel?
There is an international discussion going on, and that is about raising the general limit from 5% to 7% in Europe and in the UK, as I understand it. There's certainly no discussions happening here around that increasing the legislated retail limit on biodiesel. Where you're talking, Ken, I think is specifically more around the commercial operator, and that is really about working with the Motor Industry Association, the specific manufacturers, about moving from 5% blend rates that are accepted generally across the board by manufacturers. Quite a number actually are open to higher blend rates, and quite a number, as you say, are not. So what we have been doing is specifically trying to arrange a three-way conversation between the user, the manufacturer and ourselves to get all three parties on the page in terms of a higher blend rate. So we've had some success around it. We've in terms of our implementation, 20 million litres of biodiesel production will meet demand for us across the board at just a 5% blend rate. So we haven't factored into our business model blend rate greater than that. So anything that we do achieve above that would certainly be a bonus for us. But sorry, quite a lot of I guess appetite from our larger commercial operators to use high blends.
Yeah, certainly. If you look across Europe, there is all the heavy vehicles that are being built for transport are compatible with the 20% blend, and many of them are operating on a 20% blend. And our fuel meets the EU spec for biodiesel. So where it comes more of a challenge is where the commercial companies here in New Zealand have a wide range of vehicles. Some of them are sourced from the States, some come from Asia, and some come from Europe, and some of them are quite old. So this is where you get more of a challenge. For the new vehicles, particularly which are coming out of Europe, there's no problem. It's more just how does you're running a fleet of vehicles, how confident are you putting a B20 blend in a vehicle that might void the warranty because it's US based.
Well, just on your other point around Euro 5, I think was the issue, Ken, was so we're doing some work around that at the moment. So currently, legislatively, all manufacturers should be providing vehicles that can run on a 5% minimum biodiesel blend. Our understanding is that with Euro 5 specification that there is no issue. However, I guess the environmental benefits around particulate exhaust emissions are reduced.
What about the Euro 6, which is, I think, mandated from April this year?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you, I'm sorry. I'd have to either revert to you, Liz, on that one, or our product quality manager.
Barry Blackett. What precautions are you taking in regard of winter properties, cold properties, bearing in mind that you're planning to distribute beyond Auckland?
Yeah, a good question. Something we've done a lot of work on in terms of our R&D. So I mentioned before that used cooking oil was part of our feedstock mix. So we would be looking to blend used cooking oil with tallow as a way of improving the cold properties, particularly through the winter months. And also we have so as part of the process, as part of the production process, we blend antioxidant into the biodiesel. We also blend coal flow, or have the opportunity to blend coal flow improver into the product as well. So we're just doing some work with the additive companies around the appropriate blend rates based on the different grades of diesel that New Zealand produces through the course of the seasons.
So how far will you distribute B5? Will it go right through the North Island or just the northern half?
It'll be just the upper half of the North Island.
On behalf of the audience, I'd just like to thank you, Rob, and you, Steve, for giving us a greater insight onto Z Energy's biodiesel initiative, if I can call it that. I know for personal experience talking to our members that there is a sense of excitement around the future and what it holds. And I commend you on taking the first step and wish you the best of luck in this new project.
Thank you. Thank you.